Hello, welcome to another Mamemeister video thing. This is I'm actually making this as a video response to Lone Boy's post 1975. I don't normally do video responses. It's not something that really, I wouldn't say it doesn't interest me, it's just something that I've never really thought about doing. But he made an interesting, he asked an interesting question, which apparently he'd been asked as well, which is there a stigma attached to emulation? Quite a good question actually. Before I started collecting original hardware, I was into emulation in a big way. I mean, I started playing emulators. I never really grew out of 8-bit machines, and then when I got my Commodore Amiga, excuse me a second, I'm actually on my lunch, so I'm having to eat and talk. Yeah, when I got my Commodore Amiga, scouring the back pages of Amiga Power, whatever it was, CU, Amiga, I realised that I saw an advert for play Spectrum games on your Amiga. So I couldn't really get my head round that this would be possible. How can one computer run another computer's games? So I sent off for a floppy disk, and back came a floppy disk, a 3.5-inch floppy disk with 50 games. The emulator ran probably 50% of the speed, so it was pretty shite, but you know what, that was me hooked. Then when I eventually got the got the internet, an internet connection back in hi Archie, that's my dog just walked in. Back in 1997, I quickly googled Commodore 64 emulation, and then suddenly this whole new world of games opened up. You know, you could get emulators for everything, and as a consequence I've got quite a substantial collection of emulators, ROMs, etc, etc, etc. And you know, I played them all the time. I mean, I played them for years and years and years and years. It's just fantastic having all these games. You know, I love nothing more than reading a Crash magazine, reading about some really shitty game, and then loading it up on the emulator, and there you go, you've got it. But yeah, when I about 2-3 years ago, one of the chaps on a forum that I'm a member of, he had a collection of something like 50 odd machines, massive collection of old arcade games, old computers, consoles, etc. And he was moving house and he wanted to clear out. Now, rather than put them on eBay and make lots of money, he decided he would prefer to offer them up for people that would like them and use them, and you know, for free. So I put my hand in the air. I got a BBC Master, I got a Dragon 32, I got a VIC 20, and that was the start of my love affair with original hardware. Pardon me very much. Yeah, and then that love affair grew and grew when when a chap put an advert in the local paper saying that he was starting up a retro club, a retro computer club in Edinburgh. So I went along to the first club meeting, and that was 3 years ago. And since then, every time you go along there, there's always somebody with some new piece of hardware, some new whatever it might be, and you just think, I want one, I want one. So in the space of a couple of years, I'm completely getting off the point of what of the question, but anyway, over the last 3 years I've built up quite a substantial collection of real hardware. Now, I don't regard myself as a snob when it comes to real hardware, but I can completely get when people who own original hardware saying emulation isn't the same. Yeah, it's a bizarre thing, because I can load up a game on my original Commodore 64 and it plays just as well on the Amiga. Shut up. On the emulator that I've got on my PC, plays just as well. If not, it plays better. It's super smooth. The big thing for me that lacks is you've not got the original controller. Playing an 8-bit machine, you know, an 8-bit game with a 360 gamepad just doesn't, it just doesn't. I mean, at the end of the day, the game was written with a controller in mind, so if you're playing it with a completely different controller, you're probably not going to get the same game experience as you would if you're using real hardware. But did you hear that? That was my stomach. I've had my lunch as well. So yeah, there's that. So I will always try and use. I'm a saddle. I love nothing better than putting my original Commodore 64 on, and loading a tape image into it. I let it go through the full, flashing lines, loading music, loading screenshot, etc., etc., just to get the whole experience of playing the game. So yeah, I do prefer playing on real hardware. Saying that, all my Mamemeister mashups, 99% of them are played using I've got a little PC thing up there with all the emulators bundled on, and again, it gives you just the same experience. The funny thing was, I was playing Drop Zone on the Atari 800. Now I've got an original Atari 800 in the cupboard there. I was playing it on that, on my LCD screen, and it's quite, I wouldn't say it's jerky, but it must be the refresh rate of the TV, the new kind of modern TVs. It just doesn't scroll as smoothly as it should. Yeah, if I play it under emulation, it is super silky smooth. So there's a perfect example of a game playing probably slightly better under emulation. But yeah, so that's my personal experience on it. I don't have a problem with emulators at all. The funny thing is, sometimes I'll think to myself, I would like to play a particular game, and I think, well, I don't have it on original hardware, and I sometimes see myself, I don't play it, even though I've probably got it on the PC. So sometimes I do, I miss out on experiencing a game because I'm not prepared to play it under emulation, which kind of contradicts just what I've said. But like I said, I'd always try and play it on the real hardware. From a net, I mean, there are certainly a lot of people probably who, collectors, etc., who frown upon emulation. Well, you know what? Bollocks to them. All my game playing off sort of old hardware was always done using emulators on the PC. I'm fortunate now that I've got a lot of original hardware, so I can play it on it. But building up a collection, it's, as you know, if you've got any real hardware yourself, it is a palaver. It costs a lot of money to buy the hardware. It costs, well, it doesn't cost anymore. You've got to buy the hardware. You've got to get games. You've got to load them. You've got the storage aspect. You've even got the simple things like trying to connect an 8-bit machine to a modern TV, trying to get the bloody thing tuned. It can be a pain in the arse. So yeah, it is quite an expensive. It is an expensive hobby trying to run real hardware. Plus, you get the problems with loading games. You've got hardware breaking down, etc., etc. So yeah, emulation completely does away with all these problems. I mean, on my PC downstairs, I've got a thing called GameBase, which is a wonderful front end for emulators, and I've got something like 24, in fact it's more than that, is it 40 odd systems? Yeah, it's about 40 odd systems that I've got almost, I would say, almost complete collection of games. It includes all the usual suspects, your Spectrum, Commodore, etc. But then it also includes a system. It includes some systems that I don't have, and probably I've got no hope in hell of ever owning. And it's just what Lone Boy was saying. I mean, there's a system, the Sharp. Excuse me if I get this wrong. The Sharp 68,000, I think it was. This was a computer that came out in Japan. It was only released in Japan. It basically, the games that it released, there was a lot of like Capcom games that were absolutely arcade perfect. This computer was better than Amiga. It was, some of the games that came out for it were absolutely astonishing. I would love to have a 68,000, but the chances are of actually getting one is next to zero. They're hard to come by. You never get them on eBay. And if they do come on eBay, they go for stupid money. Then you've got the problem with it's Japanese language, trying to load the things, trying to get hold of the games, etc. So yeah, if I was to turn my nose up at emulation, then I would not be able to experience some of the gorgeous games that have come out for that. And you've also got I've got about 48 systems, I don't know, probably into the hundreds of thousands of games, all in a computer. That just wouldn't be practical to have in real life, you know what I mean? So yeah, if you don't have the money, the space, whatever, to own the original hardware, then just play emulators. In fact, I've actually just bought myself something which I've not got yet. It's a USB to, is it 9-pin joystick thing. Basically allows me to connect a standard Atari joystick using USB, which means I'll be able to play all my Commodore 64 games on my PC using a proper digital joystick. Like I said, the control system's always been the thing for me. Playing under emulation using a gamepad or keys, whatever, it's just not the same. So I'll be able to experience the emulators or experience the games as they were intended, which is brilliant. There's also obviously there's the aspect of piracy, which some people obviously would frown upon it. Most of these games, most of these systems that I've got, anything from, even dare I say, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, Xbox even back the way, these systems, there's no more software getting made for them, so there's no revenue being lost by you downloading a ROM and playing it. A ZX81, a Spectrum, the Spectrum disappeared from production 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever it was. These games no longer make money. Okay, some people would say, well, yep, they do, because they can re-release them in a new game. Perfect example was Jetpack. It came out in the 360. It was kind of revised. But you know what, the original Jetpack, it's not going to make money for anybody now. So I really don't have a problem with downloading ROMs to play these old systems. In fact, it was where I got a lot of my systems there used to be a fantastic, it was a torrent site called Underground Gamer, and it was basically dedicated to old systems. Now, they had a strict policy that if a machine was something like less than 10 years old, they would not support it. So once a machine became 10 years old, then they would host games, etc. etc. It was an absolutely fantastic archive. If you wanted to get a complete collection of SNES games, whatever, you could download it. Absolutely brilliant, fantastic site. Unfortunately, I think it was one of these companies that obviously look to try and close. They try and chase up websites that are sort of offering copyright material, and apparently because they had FIFA 1996 as a downloadable game, EA took out a whatever you want to call it, I don't know, they took it to court, and basically the site closed down, which was a sin, because this site was an archive. It was basically a museum of everything computer, and now it's gone. I'm not condoning what they did. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I really don't buy into the argument that it's wrong to download ROMs. Some people think it is. I don't see the issue with it. You're not physically stealing anything. You're not going into somebody's living room and nicking something. You're merely you're taking an image that is available and using it. Now, even if you wanted to buy that game, you couldn't. So, yeah, I don't get that. There's also in the favour of emulation, as Lone Boy said again, it's these systems won't last forever. They've got capacitors, fuses, whatever you want to call it, microchips. Some of these machines, I'm looking at the Vectrex over there, it's probably more than 30 years old. These machines aren't going to last forever, and we will get to a point. We will reach a point, I reckon, probably the next 10, 20 years, where these machines just simply aren't available. People like myself, old farts, I'm 46 years old, I've been into computers since I first saw the ZX81 at school. I've got this whole nostalgia thing for it, but I reckon that in the next couple of generations, some kids might inherit the love for old machines. There's always going to be people who are into history, and it's going to be the same in 20 years time. There's going to be kids who are into the history of video games. So yeah, so the hardware will eventually disappear, and it would be an absolute travesty if all the games, it'd be like somebody wiping out all the films that were being made in Hollywood. They need to be retained, they need to be archived for future generations to see. Well, right, Archie, I can see you, son. There's my dog come up to say hello. Yeah, I mean, it provides an archive. It provides an archive of games. This is where we came from. You know, it's a cottage industry back in the late '70s, and now we're you know, it's evolved into a multi-billion-pound industry. And for all these games, etc., just to vanish, I think would be very, very sad. I'm trying to think if I've got anything else to say on the subject of emulation. Don't think so. So no, yeah, I think emulation is an absolutely fantastic way to experience old games. You know, it's cheap. In fact, I would say it's free. If you've got an internet connection, then it's free. There's no problem with storage. It allows you to play systems and games that you'd never ever get a chance to, whether it's because they're rare or they simply go for too much money. So yeah, you know, if you want to play games, go out there, download the emulator, play them. You know, bollocks to people that say, oh, you're not getting to experience it the way it was, you know, it was written. You know, fair enough, you might not have the proper controller, but you know what? If you can't get to play, if you can't get a hold of a Vectrex, then download it and play it on your PC. It may not be as good, but you know what? It's better than not getting to play it at all. So, yep, thumbs up to me for emulation, and I look forward to hearing other people's opinions. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.